Hello, everyone. This is Jim Renacci. I want to welcome you back to another episode of the Buckeye War Room. Buckeye War Room is talking about issues affecting Ohio, federal issues affecting Ohio, federal legislation, Ohio legislation. And prior election, we were talking to election issues up to November. Now we're going to talk about issues moving forward. Today, I'm happy to have my first guest that's going to talk about federal issues. Fred McGrath is the president of the Institute for Legislative Analysis. Fred is up on the current policies in Washington, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk to him now about issues affecting the federal legislation in Ohio. So, Fred, thank you for coming on, and thank you for being part of the Ohio Buckeye War Room.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's great. It's an honor to be on the War Room with you here.
I appreciate it. Fred, why don't you give people an idea of what the Institute for Legislative Analysis is first, so people have an idea of what you do, and then we're going to talk about some federal issues.
Yes. So we launched the Institute for Legislative Analysis about 2 years ago out of the Conservative Partnership Institute in Washington, D.C. And really our mission is to bring transparency and accountability to not only the U.S. Congress, but also the state legislatures. So we do that through a number of different tools and methods, but what we're probably most known for is our scorecards, which essentially are a compilation of vote records that members of Congress and state lawmakers have taken and basically is used to showcase to just everyday activists, where do their lawmakers and officials really stand on the issues? So that's kind of been our mission, and we're looking forward to continuing to expand that out and really get down into all the states.
Well, we appreciate you doing that too, because I know a lot of people are not aware of how their legislator scores when it comes to conservative and small government principles of, I know that is the key issue for you. I know you did have an Ohio scorecard in 2023, which was announced, and it did show where people really stood when it came to their voting record here in Ohio. Hopefully you can do it in 2024 and 2025 and keep Ohioans aware. I do know you do it for the federal side too, but let's talk about this lame duck. We have a lame duck session in Washington. Try and let the listeners of this podcast know what you think is going to happen, what the issues are. Where do you think we're going in the next couple months?
Well, they call it a lame duck for a reason. It's just this time where, all the issues, all the pet projects, all this spending, really just, it all comes together, unfortunately for the taxpayers. And, here in Washington, obviously we have the 2024 elections really have shaken things up now, having that trifecta control. So, and there's going to be a lot of major changes. I mean, we can already see it in the news every day with the announcements of President Trump's cabinet and the direction he's setting. But I really think these next couple months in this lame duck, it's going to be all those things that, these lawmakers know they can't go and, are going to be able to have, success pushing in a new Trump administration. And they're just going to try to really kind of pat their pocketbooks and, just like I said, unfortunately, most likely going to result in just some horrendous spending, end of year things that that most Americans are going to have no clue is what's being implemented in these budgets and what is going to be the outcome of them.
Fred, we got a CR coming up, I believe. We got a debt ceiling increase coming up. I think the CR actually comes up during this lame duck. Is that correct?
Yes. So, you can just look at the history, and that's what we've done at the ILA. We've engaged on, countless of these previous CRs, and it's always the same story. It's, kick the can down the road. And in the CRs, put these little pet projects, and it really comes down to two things. It's not only spending as far as, oh, you're going to provide appropriations to this, project or that project. There's also carve outs. There's also, little regulatory changes. It's just a whole hodgepodge of just, unfortunately, in many ways, corruption. And really the only way you can avoid it is just, starting kind of what many kind of economists and all like to say, a zero-based budget, where you just start from the very beginning and add on, and really see what each agency really needs from an appropriations standpoint. But unfortunately, these CRs, it's none of that. It's just going and just throwing money into a broken picture, or a pitcher with a hole in the bottom is, I guess, the best analogy.
Fred, what's interesting is a lot of the listeners aren't aware that we really haven't passed budgets or appropriation bills for years. It goes all the way back, even back in the time when Clinton says he balanced the budget, and John Kasich said he balanced the budget. If you really look at the budget that was passed there, that budget was blown totally out of proportion. We had a record amount of revenue because of the 2020 or year 2000, the year 2000 explosion of technology. And if it wasn't for that, we would have had major deficits that year as well. But we just don't pass budgets. We don't pass appropriation bills. We've had CR after CR after CR. Even during President Trump's 4 years, 2016 to 2020, we had CRs, which I never supported. Because it basically just gives that blank check to the president, and the president can spend whatever he wants on whatever he thinks he needs, because we're not doing our budgeting and our appropriations.
That's exactly right. And probably the most, I'd say, astounding part of this whole process is you have so many, Republican lawmakers who tout to their constituents, I'm going to rein in this spending. I am not going to, allow, this type of, waste and corruption stuff to continue. Yet, you look at when these CRs pop up. That's exactly what they are. And in many ways, too, prior to the CRs, there's other votes that are taken by, particularly done by amendments and other procedural votes, that these lawmakers will go and, you'll have very conservative members. So let's take at the federal level, your Chip Roys, your Thomas Massey's are over on the Senate side, everyone from, your Rand Pauls. And what happens is they bring these amendments and they try to go and make these changes, yet at least half, in our latest studies and stuff that we've done nationally, two-thirds of Republicans are siding with the Democrats to allow this type of just, out of control spending to continue. Yet they'll go home back to their, constituents. So no, I'm the one, I'm the fiscally responsible one. And I think that is so much the problem, why this keeps happening over and over and over again. Because again, the average everyday American, they have no clue what's going on in these CRs. They have no clue that, what efforts have been made to stop it. And they have no clue who is actually standing for, what they claim they're standing for, and really fighting for the taxpayers. So that's, I think, is just the biggest problem with this whole process.
Fred, I served on a budget committee, and it's interesting because we can never get a budget passed. And here's the reasons. Democrats were never going to approve spending cuts. Republicans did want to put their name on spending cuts because they were afraid of, backlash from constituents, because there are some tough cuts that have to be made. I chuckle because I remember the time there were four of us trying to, turn the budget upside down. And one of them being Matt Gaetz, who we all know has been in the press here recently, but we couldn't get even that taken care of because people just did not want to put their name on cuts that are necessary. So budgets were not getting passed, but we did get a budget passed in 2017. And I can tell you what was interesting. That budget included so many things that probably should not have been in a budget, but it was our way of getting reconciliation done. And that's the one thing we're going to hear a lot about in 2025, because we'll have a 2025 budget, because I do know President-elect Trump wants to do reconciliation. It's the one way of getting things done in Congress, because you only need a simple majority in the House and simple majority in the Senate. What are you hearing about reconciliation? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that is going to be our best path. I think that's what generally the consensus is here in Washington. It's just like anything; it's just going to be another process. And I think the 2017, days are going to just essentially reappear. I think you'll start off with a outstanding budget that hardcore conservatives are going to love. Then you'll just, as the days go by, there'll be a member, refusing unless such and such is in there. And then you'll have another member saying it's such and such, and then it'll slowly but surely balloon. Now, I think the hope is going to be, or the trick, quite frankly, is going to be how controlled can we keep it, stopping the balloon from just, essentially recreating those just ginormous, outrageous spending packages we've had in the past. So it's just one of those things where everyone is, expecting this to take place, and I think it's a lot of conservatives are hopeful. We're going to have some success, but until it actually happens, who knows?
Well, and here's what's interesting, and I think the listeners just aren't aware of this, is you've got 435 members in the House. You need 218 members to pass anything. Republicans are going to have a 219 seat majority, I believe, maybe 220. They're not going to have very much room, which means every one of the representatives has a lot of power, and they're representing their district. And there are some districts that aren't conservative. There are some districts that we know want, for instance, to get back the cuts to sales tax or state tax in the budget. So they want that eliminated. There's, just like you said, it's just going to take one or two people to start to say, I want this, I want that, I want to change this. And you're going to get a budget that's going to balloon into something that we're not going to want, but we're going to have to get reconciliation done. And that's the sad thing about Washington. People are not going to walk the rope or walk the line and say, oh, I'm just going to vote 100% for this budget, because they know they're going to have power.
Exactly. And we saw, this past Congress, just with the election of the speaker. I mean, look at how long, that took. And that's just based on an individual, a single issue, versus, oh my gosh, you're talking about budgets where you have, hundreds, thousands of different components and stuff in it. So I think you're exactly right. It's just, unfortunately, with this narrow majority, we know we're going to see a lot of, pulls by, certain members getting what they want. It's just going to be I think really a leadership challenge to see, how can Speaker Johnson and these other, members in leadership really try to control all that.
And one thing I don't think people understand is many of these representatives and senators were elected not because they supported Trump. They were elected because they supported issues in their district or their state. And, but there are a lot of people that believe, well, the president wants to get this done, they should all support him. They have to be careful, because they're up for re-election in 2 years. And some senators are up for election in 2 years. They also have to be careful that they're not doing things that are 100% let's follow Trump's lead, when they're going to have to be in front of their voters in 2 years in the Senate and the House. And I think that's going to make a big difference that a lot of people just don't understand, especially out here in, what I call the real world. They think, hey, Trump won this election, everybody should be 100% behind him. But he didn't win with people, in many cases, that actually opposed him, Republicans who opposed him, and with such a slim majority, it'll be interesting.
Yes, and like with that, I mean, when you're talking about the slim majority too, I mean, this is like 1 or 2 members out of 217. I mean, just like percentages wise, I mean, it's just so razor thin, and I think what you've highlighted there, with these certain lawmakers representing their constituents in these constituencies, varying significantly across all the different, Republican districts. And here's, I think, that the fundamental problem we have. You have certain lawmakers, like I like to think of like Mike Lawler. He is in a essentially, for all intents and purposes, a Democratic district. He's a Republican in New York, who defeated the previous Democratic chair of their campaign committee in a huge upset. This was in, I believe, 2022, and then got reelected because he really stayed focused, took a moderate approach, but on certain issues that, hey, Republicans really needed him on, he stood strong. Again, maybe on a conservative scale, like our ratings, he scores, I think, a 50%. And again, some might say, well, that's just horrific. How could, a Republican be rated a 50%? And, he's not standing, he's a rhino. But here's the fact of the matter is, if he didn't take those positions, we'd have a Democrat in the seat which our ratings show, they've moved so radical left. They're averaging, 3 to 5%. That is the alternative. So it's those members such as Lawler that, hey, you want to try to help him out, and you understand that, he needs to make some concessions. However, what you can't have is Republicans in ruby red districts where, there's not a chance, at all that a Democrat would win. And they're the ones compromising on the principles or not standing up strong, for, limited government and controlling the spending. And that's where I think constituents or just everyday Americans really need to focus, putting that context into, the lawmakers' ideology and how they're voting, and then also who they represent.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, it doesn't only come down to the district and whether it leans Republican or Democrat. Sometimes there are districts. I know I had to take a vote that was against what Republicans wanted because the vote represented 2 businesses in my district, which is also a whole nother thing, thousands of employees. And if I would have voted with Republicans, I would have actually been voting against, thousands of employees in my district. It's the challenge that we have. But look, I think these are the issues that are going to come up in 2025. I think we need to talk, make sure we understand that. We need people to understand that as well. How about scorecards? Where are we going to be with scorecards in 2025?
Yes. So, of course, our number one is the federal. So that's where we always start. And we've produced the most comprehensive analysis ever done on the U.S. Congress. So every year we have over 65,000 votes that go in and make up the scorecard. So it actually has more data points than any other scorecard or study produced, left or right, combined. And what that's designed to do is really pinpoint exactly where these elected officials stand on the issues. And we have categories as well that really showcase, well, maybe you're a champion on healthcare or education, but you're not as strong on taxes and budget. The scorecards are designed to really showcase that. Now, going in and kind of taking that same model, we're bringing it to each of the state legislatures as well. And we had again done a version in Ohio there in 2023, and really what we're now trying to do is even expand on that and do an even deeper dive. What we almost like to say, call it as an audit to really showcase, where all these folks are. And right now we're trying to hit as many of these conservative states as possible, as well as some of the swing states. Like our team is working on, states like Colorado, where we're trying to provide that, support and recognition to even Republicans that are perhaps not in power over the legislature, but have some influence and at least can help push things in the right direction.
Well, look, I appreciate what you're doing there. We look forward to many, many more scorecards. We also look forward to the national scorecard and moving our country forward. So I want to thank you for being on the Buckeye War Room today. Again, for those listeners who want to understand more about the scorecard, you can go to their website. Do you want to mention your website?
Yes, it's pretty simple. It's limitedgov.org, and you can find all the scorecard data for our national, states, and it's all there.
That's perfect. So for our listeners, go to limitedgov.com and
limitedgov.org.
Limitedgov.org. You'll get to see a lot of the scorecards and a lot of the work that Fred and his entity are doing. So again, Fred, I want to thank you for being on the Buckeye War Room. This is a wrap on this edition of the Buckeye War Room. Again, I want to thank you all for listening in. Buckeye War Room is all about federal and issues that affect the state of Ohio. We're looking forward to having multiple guests over the next few months, again, to talk about Ohio's budget as well and where we're going in Ohio. So again, thank you. And this is Jim Renacci signing off to this edition of the Buckeye War Room.